Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, one in a series of virtual events the Center on Global Energy Policy is hosting as part of Climate Week, NYC. My name is Laurie Fitzmaurice, and I am the Executive Director at the Center on Global Energy Policy at Columbia University. Today, our Women in Energy program, whose vision is to create an equitable, inclusive energy sector that is better prepared to address global energy needs, has brought together a dynamic panel of experts to discuss powering an equitable, sustainable, and just global energy transition. Let me quickly say that this event is being webcast live and recorded. The full video will be available online in the coming days. For those of you joining us via Zoom, you can submit a question for the panelists at any time by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. For those of you watching the live stream anywhere else, you can submit questions via Twitter using the hashtag CGEPLive and our Twitter handle at ColumbiaUEnergy. Before we start the panel discussion, I'd just like to take a moment to introduce our panelists and have each of them give a brief introduction. I'd like to start with Maria Gillescu. Maria?
Hi, Laurie, and hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm very excited for the conversation today, and thank you for organizing this discussion. My name is Maria Gillescu. I am the founder and CEO of Ordinal Investment Management. We're an investment firm focused on a low carbon energy transition strategy. I started it 3 years ago after spending 15 years at Goldman Sachs. And that is my day job. In my night job, I am an advisory board member for the Center on Global Energy Policy at Columbia University that Laurie is running. And I also am the co-chair of their Women in Energy program that I am sure we'll be talking about later in the program.
Thank you, Maria. Adaku Ufere, who joins us, she's Deputy Chief of Party at USAID West Africa Energy Program with Deloitte. Adaku?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Laurie. Thank you for having me here. My name is Adaku Ufere, and I'm an international energy, gender, and development attorney. So I have over a decade's experience leading the structuring and implementation of billion-dollar energy projects in sub-Saharan Africa. I'm currently the Deputy Chief of Party of the USAID-funded Power Africa West Africa Energy Program, implemented by Deloitte Consulting in Accra, Ghana. And at the West Africa Energy Program, I lead operations across 23 countries in West and Central Africa, with a team working to expand supply of and access to affordable and grid-connected electricity services through technical assistance, capacity building, and transaction support. For those of you who might not be aware, Power Africa was launched in 2013 and brings together technical and legal experts, the private sector, and governments from around the world to work in partnership to increase the number of people in Africa with access to power. Power Africa's goal is to add more than 30 megawatts of cleaner, more efficient electricity generation capacity and 60 million new home and business connections. Empowering women is one of Power Africa's core goals, and we do this by supporting projects, programs, and policies that intentionally strive to reduce gender inequalities and promote effective engagement of both men and women in sub-Saharan Africa. So I'm very happy to be here today to discuss my work with Power Africa and how we help obviously reduce gender inequality.
Thank you, Adaku.
Thank you.
And Vaishali Sinha, who is the Chief Sustainability, CSR, and Communication Officer of Renew Power. Vaishali. Vaishali, I believe you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Hi,
No
thanks, Laurie. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here with such dynamic members on the panel. It's great to see an all-women panel, and I'm glad Columbia University is, having a conversation on this very important topic. I'm a member of the founding team of a company called Renew Power, which is India's leading renewable energy company. It's an independent power producer. I'm the chair of Renew Foundation, and look at a lot of the work which relates to the transition from a social point of view, and am deeply engaged with sustainability and kind of inclusive sort of growth of women in this sector. Yeah, so I kind of feel that there is so much more we have to do here in India to ensure that women get more engaged. And also what renewable energy companies do, they do it in a greener way. So hence that's the journey, which is also a part of what I'm trying to do here. Just to give you a sense of Renew Power is about 10 years old, and we have about 10 gigawatts of solar and wind energy assets across India, over 110 sites in 8 states in India. And yeah, we generate 1% of India's total annual electricity requirements, and we help mitigate about 0.5% of the country's annual carbon emissions. We are the only clean energy company which has crossed 5 gigawatt in capacity. And yeah, so we kind of, I would say, I could say comfortably spearheading the energy transition which is taking place in India. And we are delighted to be contributing towards the target of 175 gigawatts from renewables by 2020, which has been set by the Prime Minister of our country. And, I feel quite good, working in an area, in a country where our leadership is committed to clean energy. Yeah, that's me. And I'm an alum of SEPA, and delighted to be here. And yeah, look forward to this green conversation.
Thank you very much, Vaisali, and thank you for mentioning that you were a SEPA alum, because I was about to do so if you didn't. I'd just like to say that it's a tremendous pleasure and an honor for me to be here with this dynamic panel. We were very excited to be able to assemble a group of such impressive women from around the globe for this conversation. We're here to discuss powering an equitable, sustainable, and just global energy transition. And I'd like to move now into the moderated discussion. We'll be opening up to questions from the audience in just a little bit, but for now, those of you joining us via Zoom, you could submit a question for the panelists at any time by clicking on the Q&A button. I'd just like to remind you that's at the bottom of your screen, and you can submit questions via Twitter using our hashtag CJEPLive and our Twitter handle at Columbia U Energy. Now, as I move into some questions here for the panel, I want to start by tossing out a question for the three of you. What does a just global energy transition look like to you? When you hear that, what do you think of in your context, in the area where you work every day? Adaku?
Thank you, Laurie. So obviously I work in the energy sector in sub-Saharan Africa, most specifically West Africa. And to me here, a global energy transition means the transformation of the global energy sector, obviously from fossil-based to a zero-carbon industry, with the final goal being the abolishment of non-renewable energy sources. So far, renewable sources have served as an alternative to fossil and nuclear fuels. So a timely implementation for the energy transition will require multiple approaches in parallel. So through smart technology, through policy frameworks and market instruments. Now, in my current role and in my organization, Power Africa in West Africa is currently working on several projects that promote the use of clean fuels. For example, in Chad, we are advising on a 28 megawatt solar plant as part of an initiative with another donor organization. So this project will significantly increase the generation capacity in Chad by 14% and also assist the country to significantly reduce its energy deficit and heavy reliance on fossil fuels. So that's a project that's obviously very important to us. And in Côte d'Ivoire, also in West Africa, we are working with the government to design an innovative activity to support the state utility, the electricity company of Côte d'Ivoire, in energy efficiency and productive use. So this project will connect more than 10,000 new households to the grid. In Ghana, we're also working to develop public-private partnerships to increase energy efficiency in about 2 large public sector consumers. Thank you.
And when you think about, as we reflect on, obviously that's, the energy transition part, but what is it that makes it just and equitable?
I would say it's the methods that are being used. So, I mean, it's because we always have, all these advisors coming in and telling people, the third world or developing countries, this is how you solve your problems. But the means are not always accessible to these countries. So I would say it's the means by which we're doing these projects. We're involving the government. We're making sure there's on-the-ground support. We're making sure we're focused on transactions. We're making sure we're bridging the financing gap, and obviously including vulnerable communities. So, women, disabled people, low-income families as well.
Thank you. Vaishali or Maria, would either of you like to answer this same question? What does a just global energy transition look like to you? And what are you doing in your current role with your organization to achieve this?
I could go first. So for me, I think the transition should ensure a better quality of life for all segments and sections in the society, and not necessarily just benefit one group, at the expense of another. So for me, that is really the essence of it. And the equitable energy transition also means that everybody has equal rights to the benefits of this transition. And so we all have to ensure together that nobody gets left out, especially women, because women are at the receiving end of what is happening and what climate kind of has in terms of a negative impact on the lives. Women are the ones at the receiving end. So we really need to ensure that, they don't, they benefit from it as well. They have a voice on the table, so that, what they experience can be converted into, I guess, policies which can help their lives become better. So, and also let's be fair, as people lose jobs from the traditional, conventional sources of energy generation, we really have to be fair towards them also, so that they're also committed. And so we ensure that jobs lost from that sector can be incorporated in the renewables space as well. So and some amount of reskilling and commitment, and that is just within, I would say, a region or a country. But there's also a requirement that globally there is a fairness in this whole transition. If we look at the past years and what's going to happen, there's been a certain amount of development across the world in different ways, whereas there's development yet to come. So how can we balance this all out? That would be also the essence of the justness which I would like to see in this transition.
Maria.
Lori, can I add a slightly different aspect to these great answers? I would say that there's 3 aspects. They're top of mind right now, not just in the US, but also globally. And we've been discussing as a society more broadly across the board. And those 3 are diversity, inclusion, and social justice. And I think they go hand in hand with climate change and with the energy transition. And I think these 3 aspects, diversity, inclusion, and social justice, are going to be an absolutely critical part of a just energy transition. And one thing that I think is very important is that this is not just nice to have, but it's a must have. The business case for having an equitable energy transition is just too good, too strong to ignore. I recently read a McKinsey study that actually looks at the amount of outperformance that diverse teams add to companies, and gender diversity adds 24 percentage points of outperformance. And then when you add racial diversity into that, the outperformance becomes 33%. So the way I see it is that the energy transition is a very, very tall task. And us at Columbia, we actually had a seminar just the other week in response to the great work that the IEA has been doing on energy technologies available to have a successful energy transition. And the conclusion was that half of the emission reduction needs to come from technologies and solutions that are not even available today. So this is a very, very tall task, a very difficult task, and we need all the help that we can get. And diverse groups make better decisions, and we absolutely should make that a priority. Also, us at Columbia, we have a fantastic professor, Phillips, who unfortunately passed away last year, but she has done incredibly interesting work around the fact that diverse groups reach better outcomes, make better decisions, and therefore this is not just about making it a just and fair energy transition. This is about improving our chances of actually having a successful energy transition.
Thank you, Maria. I think you really hit the nail on the head. What we're talking about is we know we have a tremendous task ahead of us in the energy transition. We know that, I think as women, particularly in this industry, we know the challenges that we have faced as individuals and the things that we have done to try to move our industry forward. And I love how you really hit on diverse groups reaching better outcomes and making better decisions. And I know the commitment that we have all made. I'd like to follow that theme and maybe ask the other panelists, when we think about the issues and challenges that women's full participation in the energy transition is facing and has faced, and playing off the comments that Maria has made, what do you think about in your regions? What are the challenges to that full participation of diverse groups in order to make those better decisions? What are those, and can you give us some examples, and how do you think that you in your positions can work towards those better outcomes? Adaku?
Right, thank you, Lori. So the intersection between energy and gender in West Africa poses a wide spectrum of challenges, to gender-based violence, to economic impact, to lack of representation in policy. The problems are endless. It's where do you even start from? And as obviously a woman in the sector that is male-dominated, this is something I've seen from time to time, that one of the more glaring inequalities is that it's male-dominated and very few women in leadership, technical and supervisory positions, like in utilities and energy sector agencies. For example, there's only one female energy minister in West Africa, and that is the Minister of Energy and Hydraulics in the Republic of Guinea, Mrs. Rabi Yatara, and she was recently appointed, I believe. So this is not a common phenomenon that we have, to just have women in these leadership positions that can influence policy. So this presents an obvious gap between women in national policies that will address the clean energy transition, holding back the sector's efforts to tackle climate change and the transition to clean energy. There's a professor of energy policy at the University of Exeter in the UK, Catherine Mitchell, and she says that poor gender diversity means that the industry is less open to new ideas. So in particular, the move to a lower carbon energy system. Because if you have, the usual 10 men round a table, similar background, similar education, they're going to have similar ideas. They're not going to be thinking in a diverse way. So that diversity is.
Yeah, I think we've unfortunately lost Adaku. I'm hoping she'll come back. I think she hit on, though, as she mentioned, there's real challenges. I'd like to comment for a moment on the issue of representation. What she mentioned is there's very limited representation at the highest levels of women in positions of authority and leadership. And as Maria was talking about, diverse groups make better decisions. I think we know that. Having spent 30 years in this industry, I can say that I am now seeing more women than ever coming into the energy industry, which I think speaks very well for our future. I often mentor women in the Women in Energy program. We see a lot of younger women. I know there's a lot of women in mid-level careers now who I would encourage to continue. I think it's a better moment than ever to come into the industry. But as Maria mentioned, it's questions of diversity and inclusion and social justice more broadly. Vaishali, can you comment for us a little bit on what your experience is in your context around these issues of diversity, inclusion, and social justice?
Yeah, sure, Lori, absolutely. I think to a certain extent we have common issues. But if I were to look at some of the unique issues, which don't seem unique because, as I was listening to the other panelists, I think there are, differences. So I would say in India, I think a major problem for not including women as much as they should is the deeply entrenched socio-cultural norms around gender and inclusion of women in activities which go beyond the domestic sort of periphery of their existence. So I think that's a fundamental problem. And if you go from urban India to rural India, that gets more and more entrenched in the communities. Having said that, as I said in the beginning as well, that women are at the receiving end of a lot of the negativities associated with this. So when you look at the way they are using fuel, it's awfully harmful to them, right? They're using all these chulas, whereas you have the option of green chulas, etc. But there is lack of knowledge. So lack of education leads to ignorance, which actually hurts women also in a big way. And so therefore it's important that there is more education and there's more creation of awareness around what needs to be done to improve the lives of women and to ensure that, women can actually, benefit from this just energy transition, which we are all talking about and debating. But people who are at the receiving end are sort of trapped in that, zone without being able to get out of it. So a lot of education, a lot of skilling of some of these rural women. And, I do a lot of work around entrepreneurship. I do work around entrepreneurship in rural India and also in Delhi at the Indian Institute of Technology, which is one of the premier technology institutes here. And we work on engaging women in STEM, and then we're also seed funding a program. It's a women's accelerator program in sustainability and renewables. So we're trying to promote entrepreneurship there. But women don't really have access to funds as they should. And so there's a lot of biases which exist. And so hence we started this program both in rural and urban India to ensure that we make it a women-centric program where women who have the ideas and the interest that they're able to go ahead with their programs and ideas. So I think that is one area which is also unique, which is not unique to India, because I think my co-panelists would agree that that is a bias which exists in the top cities around the world, whether it is whether it is Silicon Valley or wherever else, there is a bias, and we really need to look at this. And so therefore you need more women funders, you need more women in policy making and decision making, so that perspective is highlighted and addressed. Right. And I think in India, often women who are in leadership positions, who are making policies, whether it is at the panchayat level in the villages or whether it is in the ministries in the central government, a lot of it is around tokenism. They are sort of fronts for others. And so they're not necessarily contributing as they should. They're not engaged as they should be. So these are some of the unique issues, I would say, which are preventing from, for us to move towards a just transition. And yeah, I did talk about how we can address, we should recruit more women. That's important. We should recruit more women. We should vote for more women. And so that we have more women in leadership positions and in positions of power, so that we can bring about this transition, which we really so badly want to.
Thank you, Vaishali. You've touched on some really interesting different things. Let me unpack that for a moment. What I heard some very, you touched on a multitude of items. One, I heard some real equity, gender inclusion gaps there. In particularly in rural areas, I heard women, issues around fuel and access to education as well. I also heard issues of representation that you touched on, that Adaku mentioned, and I heard issues around access to education and access to funding. I heard 4 separate issues there. I'd like to separate those.
And access to energy. Yeah.
Yes.
And access to energy.
And access to energy.
Clean energy.
Yeah. So let's talk about those, separate out those 5. We've got access to education, energy access, and, representation.
Funding.
And access to funding. I'd like Maria to comment in particular on issues of representation and access to funding and finance.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Lori. I would say, just taking a step back and without making too broad of a generalization, I would say that the set of challenges are slightly different in the developed markets versus the developing markets. And, Vaishali mentioned education, and I think that is a very, very important challenge in the developing world. And, Adaku started by saying, where do I start? The number of challenges is just so great. The good news that at least here in the US or in Europe, education is not an issue. Actually, more than 50% of the degrees, 51 or 52% of the degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, are actually attained by women. So this is definitely not an educational issue. We would need to address some of the other challenges, like you, Lori, mentioned, access to capital and access to sponsorship and mentorship once you enter the workforce. But I think there's ways to think about it a little bit differently. At the entry level, when you enter into the workforce, I think one big challenge is the public perception and the public opinion, because as more and more of the new generation is very mission driven and very purpose driven, a lot of them, especially women, don't think of the energy sector as a good place to start, because they think of the energy sector as polluting and dirty and having contributed to so much of the current climate challenge. So we need to be mindful of this public perception that is a real issue. At the more senior and at the management level, there's a lot of other issues in terms of women's advancement. It's the pipeline, it's the lack of mentorship, the lack of sponsorship, and like you said, perhaps the inequitable access to capital and opportunity. But I think permeating through all of these are unconscious biases, and these unconscious biases are biases that we all have. I have them, you have them, and the key here is to be aware of them and try to proactively mitigate them. So I think of them as the confirmation bias, the affinity bias, the status quo bias, and the same way that, for example, orchestras around the world started having blind auditions or auditions behind a curtain, and voila, more women made it on stage. I think in a similar way, we're going to see with more focus on mitigating these unconscious biases, we're going to see more women rise up to the top in the energy sector more broadly. And I would say, I'd say there's a few things that in the developed markets have worked really well. And I'll give one example, the one of the Nordic countries, the Nordic European countries in Scandinavia, where there's policies in place to even out the playing field around maternity. So what's interesting about those policies is that women get 6 months or 12 months of maternity leave, but so do men. And they're actually mandatory. And that really evens out the playing field. And I think that's a great example of a successful way of overcoming these challenges. Another example that I would give in Japan is what's been called by my former employer, Goldman Sachs, womanomics, right? As part of Abe's revival of the economy, as part of his Abenomics plan, the increase of women into the workforce participation and the access to more opportunities has actually contributed greatly to their ability to kickstart their economy in the last 7 or 8 years. So these are just, a couple of examples of challenges that have been overcome in the developed markets. I am very aware of the fact that the challenges in the developing markets are significantly different and very serious. And Adaku was I had started to talk about some of them before she cut off, so perhaps she wants to pick that up from where she left.
Yes, absolutely. Adaku, please.
I'm so sorry. Great internet is obviously one of the problems as well. So yeah, mine is a bit dodgy. No, I mean, I think I had just spoken about there being just one female energy minister in West Africa. So imagine all the other ministries and energy sector agencies, no women. When these policies are being addressed, what is the perspective going to be? It's going to be a completely skewed towards men. And basically, increasing women's participation in the energy sector workforce is one of Power Africa's main gender mainstreaming approaches. And our advisors utilize a methodology that promotes leadership through mentoring and training programs, through enhancement of networking opportunities, either through the creation of new platforms or in coordination with existing regional networks. And I don't know if this has been mentioned because I missed some of it. The prevalence of biomass in cooking and heating and fossil fuels in lighting in rural and low-income urban areas has presented a significant challenge because these women spend more time on unpaid energy-intensive household labor. So like cooking with like laundry, like fetching firewood, like fetching water. So this is leading to time poverty, which is translating to material poverty. It impacts their health as cooking with firewood, coal, and other unclean fuels causes women to be disproportionately affected by indoor pollution. I think the World Health Organization estimates that household air pollution causes 4 million premature deaths every year. And obviously the women rank very high. It also, and I think Vaishali mentioned, it also impacts education because 58 million children worldwide, according to the WHO, do not attend school. And a majority of this is girls, and this is because they stay at home to assist their mothers with household labor. This is a huge problem we see across, not just West Africa, but across Africa. There's also a link to gender-based violence, and this is a Power Africa article written in 2017, which shows that limiting the use of fossil fuels limits women's access to information. So they don't have proper electricity at home. They don't listen to the news. There's no access to the outside world to know that norms are changing. So obviously the men are going to be more patriarchal, more misogynistic. And you just think it's as simple as switching on a light, but it's not just lighting up your home. Women's safety is a huge issue. In villages that have street lighting, there's less, rapes, there's less violence because it's not dark. Economic empowerment, safety, the challenges are endless, right? So we try to attack, and I would say attack because these are huge problems, attack it from different angles. We have the dearth of female entrepreneurs in the energy sector. They have less access than men to land, credit, critical information needed for engaging in opportunities to improve their access to energy and generate micro enterprises. So in the off-grid sector, there is a growing number of female entrepreneurs, but the growth is not fast enough at all to combat that need. And I know Power Africa's efforts to improve the business environment for energy companies and projects considers the specific challenges that women face as energy entrepreneurs. So we ensure that interventions facilitate female access to business opportunities, such as providing support to women-led IPPs, improving uptake of female-led energy service and products, and providing support for small-scale enterprises. So there has been an uptick, obviously, through all these interventions, but it's not happening as fast as we need it.
Laurie, can I just come in and make a very quick point on some of the
Yeah.
points which were made by Maria and Adaku as well? You know, as far as the biases are concerned, I think women have a lot of misunderstanding about the opportunities which this energy transition has to offer, whether it is misunderstanding or ignorance. You know, at least in India, if I could speak, you know, from ground zero here, that, you know, women have an impression, or people have this impression that the renewable space or the other sectors are very infrastructure type of you know, sectors to work in. But the reality is that there are many more opportunities for women. And I think it's on forums like this that we can talk about it and highlight. So whether it is financing, whether it is R&D, whether it is digitalization, whether it is the fourth industrial revolution type of opportunities. Now I'm talking about the urban and the global scenario. There are lots of opportunities for women. And I'm not sure if there is a lot of awareness about the opportunities. So when we try and recruit women here at Renew, because we really have that goal that we want more women in senior leadership positions, you know, that's what's coming out. So there are a lot of women, you know, if you ask them to join a law firm, and, you know, that's fine because they expect a certain environment. But in the, say, the renewables and some of the other related sectors, they feel that, you know, it's not the best and the most convenient and the most attractive sector for them to get engaged in. So I want to use this platform to say that there are lots of opportunities coming up, you know, as I said, innovation, R&D, entrepreneurship, finance, and there's so many other opportunities which work very well. And I think we all have to also address, you know, as they say, the elephant in the room, which is, you know, you have to look at the convenience of working. I mean, I know we may want in an ideal world to be neutrality, you know, as far as gender neutrality is concerned, but at least in India, if I could say, there is definitely a huge gap between, you know, kind of opportunities women have, pay parity women have, the perks at work women have, for them to be able to have parity to become professionals, and as men do. I want to put it on the table that we've come a long way. There's lots which is being done. Lots of companies are coming up with policies, but there's not enough. So I think women need to know that there is, you know, there are a lot of very interesting opportunities which fit into their sort of scheme of things to be successful professionals as we speak now. I know a lot of changes will come later on, hopefully, if we all keep working. But it's going to take some time. But even now, there are lots of opportunities. And so this bias of an inconvenient workplace, which some women have about this sector, I think we should all work together as women in energy and leaders in the energy space to remove and clarify and share opportunities.
Vaishali, can you just maybe give us a little bit more information on some of the specific things that Renew is doing or that you're seeing done to combat this bias and to recruit more women, and specific to the energy transition?
Yeah, sure. So I talked about a couple of programs already as I spoke. One was the Rewin program, which is a program where we work on engaging women in rural India in entrepreneurship programs, which are local to their ecosystem. So we've seen that in addition, I mean, women may be very bright even in rural India, but they lack the confidence to do things. And so this is a program around confidence building, capacity building, getting them to meet mentors who look like them, walk and talk like them, so that they feel confident that they can also engage in entrepreneurial activities. So we run a program where we look at about 500 women and bring those down to about 5 women who we seed fund in rural India to work on programs. So it could be like turmeric plantation, or, you know, sanitary napkins, organic manufacturing of these, and then marketing of these activities, raising funds for these small programs. So we work on these sort of, you know, micro level programs in rural India. And that's worked really well. You know, we got one of the set of women we are working with, one of the clusters. These are self-help group programs with a focus from a remote part of Western India to Delhi. And we got them to speak in their local language about what they felt about their journey. And I can tell you that we had people from the international arena participating in that conference, and the confidence with which they spoke pretty much crushed everybody else who was present there, because they were so excited about it and they were so charged. So what I'm saying is, it's a little bit of a nudge which really empowers these women. And when somebody expresses confidence in them, their whole ecosystem also comes together to support them, because they see the economic benefits of this activity. And then in addition to that, I mentioned that we're promoting girls in STEM. And so we are working with the leading engineering school here to ensure that we get more women to come and get engaged in this whole sort of series of climate-related entrepreneurship opportunity. We've partnered with the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, to come up with an accelerator program. It's our first year, so I can't talk much about it, but I'm really excited about it. And I'm also chairing the South Asian Women in Energy platform, where we are working with policymakers to make sure that the energy space includes more women, and there are opportunities where some of these job opportunities are posted, and so that women know a lot more about renewable energy and the exciting opportunities it has to offer. So within Renew and outside Renew, that's what I'm trying to do.
Excellent, thank you. We have a number of questions in the Q&A. Would any of the panelists like to make any other comments before I turn to the Q&A? Maria?
Yeah, I'd like to make a quick comment, and this is more a note of caution other than anything else. The small improvements that we're seeing are very, very encouraging, because obviously we're coming from a small base. But I would say that we have to be extra careful of the impact of the current pandemic on this trend of increasing equity and diversity in the energy transition. We have seen it last time around in the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. A disproportionate number of women lost their jobs across the board, but also in the energy patch. I worry that I'm starting to see the same trend now, which is significantly exacerbated by the fact that we are currently in a down cycle in the energy sector. But I would say that we have to be extra careful of the step back that the current pandemic would create for us. And there's a whole variety of things that come into play here. But I would say, women drop first out of the workforce. Also, they don't get the same promotion, or they don't get the same reviews because of some of these unconscious biases that we talked about. So for example, your boss has an assignment to give you at 5 p.m. and everybody's working from home. Are you going to give it to the man on the team, or are you going to give it to the woman on the team? And you might not give it to the woman on the team because you might think, I know she has children, she has to feed them, she has to make dinner. So you end up giving the assignment to the man on the team, and therefore creating an opportunity for him that the woman didn't have in the first place at all. So key to this is communicating. Key to this is for women to put their hand up and say, maybe I can't do it from 5 to 7, but I can do it, from 8 o'clock to midnight, and I'll get it done. So it's something that everybody has to be mindful of, because I think that this current pandemic can undo a lot of the good that's been done.
I think you're absolutely correct. And I can certainly say, speaking of my own career, that I have seen those unconscious biases at work. And I think you're right that communication is really key. And I would say that self-examination, I think it behooves all of us, men and women, to be willing to look at our own unconscious biases. And I am encouraged by the fact that I think there has been a bit of a shift in society in the last 5 to 10 years, at least in the countries in which I've lived recently, which has been 4 separate ones in the last 10 years, that there's more of a discussion around those things. I think we do have a long way to go, but you're absolutely right, Maria, that the impact of this pandemic on the workforce has been so hard and has specifically hit women. And I have seen statistics that I can't cite off the top of my head, but that women have been disproportionately hit in terms of job loss, service sectors, and those are jobs that are not coming back quickly. And in the energy sector, as you said, we're in a down cycle in commodities and in prices, and it's a difficult time all around. And I think these are things that we need to be conscious of. Adako or Vaishali, we do have time if either of you would like to comment on this before we go to the Q&A.
Yes, I don't mind. Yeah, Adaku, you want to go first?
Yeah,
Otherwise,
no, I was going to comment on your earlier question to Vaishani about, what projects you're working on to help, women and help the global energy transition. And over here, like I said before, we work through, mentorship, networking, raising awareness, leadership training, that sort of thing. And I'll say for something like raising awareness, that's something that I feel is actually quite personal, because that's how I got into the energy industry. My background is in oil and gas law, and I decided to go into oil and gas law because in 2010, while I was working in maritime litigation, Nigeria appointed its first ever female Minister of Petroleum Resources. And her name is Dezani Alison Madueke. And I was so inspired by that, by the fact that there was this, fabulous woman who didn't kind of hide her femininity, but yet she was in this huge male-dominated sector. Nigeria has one of the biggest economies for petroleum in Africa, if not the biggest. And I literally quit my job and went off to the University of Aberdeen to get a master's in oil and gas law. And that's how I got into energy. And so it's that, if I didn't have that visibility, that person to aspire to, I mean, how would I know or how would I have figured this is what I want to do? So it's one of the cruxes of Power Africa's work in ensuring women get equal opportunities. We also have a program called the Young Women in African Power Leadership Training Program. And I'm an alumnus of the first cohort of the program, which was held in 2018. And Power Africa collaborates with the Young African Leaders Initiative, which is an initiative of the US State Department, to build the leadership skills of young women in Africa's energy sector. So we recently held the third cohort this year, where my team developed and facilitated training modules based on key energy sector concepts to about 40 young women professionals in the energy sector. We're also very prevalent in off-grid energy, because that's a sector where there's a lot of female entrepreneurs in off-grid. So people selling solar home systems, that sort of thing. For example, Power Africa's off-grid program supported a solar home systems company operating in Ghana called PEG Africa. They wanted to create employment opportunities for women and ensure that their solar home systems, their solar home products, were reaching female consumers. So PEG was interested in the business case for gender equality that demonstrates positive business results for more gender balanced companies. So Power Africa worked with PEG to create a gender action plan, and they identified targets such as recruiting a full-time gender project officer, instituting a mentorship program, conducting a pay gap analysis and promotion data analysis, creating gender responsive policies, supporting gender inclusive recruitment. And a key thing we noticed was, I think this has become quite common now, but back then it was that when they put out job applications, they were always very gendered, especially if they're looking for engineers, is he must be, himself. So putting he, she, or using they and adding just a tagline, women encouraged to apply, shot up their female applications by almost 15%. It was actually quite something so simple. It was actually quite, interesting to see that could create such a change. We also have another program called Engendering Utilities, and it's a global USAID program that builds the capacity of utilities to integrate gender equity best practices into their operating procedures. And we do this through conducting groundbreaking research on gender disparity in the energy sector, reforming the human resources life cycle, and partnering with utilities in West Africa, or globally actually, to increase gender equality. So far, Engendering Utilities has worked with utilities in Ghana, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Kenya, Malawi, Mozambique, Rwanda, Liberia, Senegal, and this has greatly bolstered the participation of women in Africa's energy workforce. So I know we know the progress isn't as swift as we'd like, well, hearing what everyone is doing in their various organizations, what I am doing, what we're all doing, and we're seeing, little jumps in these percentages. It shows that what we're doing is working. And the more we talk about it, the more we highlight what we're doing, other organizations will pick it up as well. And hopefully the progress might become more swift than we've envisioned.
Excellent. Thank you, Adaku. It sounds like you're really working on some fabulous projects. We should really get together once a year and see how the progress goes.
We should. I can send you my mail targets. We're moving.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it. We will definitely stay in touch and do this again. Vaishali, would you like to comment on either? I think it would be really interesting to pick up on some of the comments Maria made, as well as those Adaku has mentioned.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So just picking up on what Maria mentioned in her comments, I think there are assumed biases with respect to what women, expect in the workplace. In terms of, women would want to go back at a certain time, etc. And, at Renew, we had done this town hall where we had all the women present, and we had a senior management folks present. We have a management committee, and unfortunately, I'm the only woman there, and that's the part which we're really working on. But everybody there assumed that women would like to go back home. And I said, wait a minute, let's just ask them. How many of them would want to go back, prioritize going back versus working on a really cool project? And all of them wanted to be on a project irrespective of how they manage it. They said, that's our business. So that communication gap, I think we need to keep checking on that. So there's a huge gap which exists within an organization where, the seniors, who are mostly men, whether we like it or not, often it's a majority of men who have a certain understanding of how women want to work at the workplace. And most women felt that, they come to work because they want to succeed and be, successful, because that's their goal. And so sensitivity to them, their situation should be as much of a consideration as it would be to their male counterparts. And I was so proud, because I was like really nervous, thinking that, women are going to say, oh yeah, no, we want to go back at 5 and we have to do this and that. And everybody came out with one voice that yes, we may have, and we'll manage it. We may ask our teams to start working earlier if you want to leave earlier. That's our business. So I was really proud to hear women speak up, because they were given a platform to speak about what they wanted to do and how they wanted to do things. And that's the good news, that women of today, I see the youngsters and a lot of the women who have the opportunities really want to go for it. And they just need that platform to be able to raise their voice, talk about it. And I think it's people who are there who need to be who are not aware of the truth that exists now. So I just wanted to put that on the table, that there is a huge amount of sense of confidence and self-belief which exists amongst the women workforce, which is there, and it's a small percentage which exists, and we really need to grow it. And I also want to bring one more point, that if you look at the general work, like the qualities of the top CEOs around the world, a lot of the qualities which we're talking about there, and I say this a lot when I speak, have been sort of the kind of qualities which the same studies identify as being qualities which mostly, we see that women, it's their strength, and, like empathy and some of these, I have to be careful. I have to be very careful about how I'm saying what I'm saying. So pardon me for like kind of being extra careful. But when you see these qualities in women at the workplace, they are often taken not as positives, but as negatives. So we really need to balance this, fact versus perception. And, we really need to walk the talk on what we are writing and theorizing versus what actually exists. So let's tap this potential, this fantastic potential which exists, and convert it into like a powerhouse of, professional performance, which is there, which is latent, which is dormant. Yeah.
Before I go to the Q&A, Maria, any last comment?
Let's go into the Q&A. I see we have
got
a lot
of great questions. We've got a number of questions in the Q&A. So I'd like to move to the Q&A right now. And I'd like to thank the audience. We have several questions. I'm going to start with Annalise Sevenson. To have an inclusive access of energy or of any other services, you must be aware of excluding mechanisms. Which is the excluded population and mechanisms, and what is being done to address this? It is not only women, which I think is an excellent point, Annalise. Women are certainly not the only excluded population in a lot of situations. So what are the excluding mechanisms in your respective countries and contexts? Adako, you're working in more than one country, of course. What are these excluding mechanisms? What are the excluded populations? And what are being done to address it? Adako,
yeah, thank you, Laurie. I would say besides women, obviously, a lot of what we say will constitute exclusion is people and low-income people or rural people or people who don't speak English or people who are differently abled. Now we do have quite a thriving civil society sector and community engagement sector, which ensures that all these marginalized groups are being considered and heard and taken care of. So say we move into, like I mentioned earlier, a project we're doing in Cote d'Ivoire to connect 10,000 homes to the grid. So it's called Connections Plus. And we're basically moving into rural areas that don't have any transmission or energy infrastructure. And before you come into those communities, you have to engage like the community leaders first. And these community leaders are usually male. So what we tend to do is to create a community engagement plan before we move into these communities, find out who are the marginalized communities here, and then meet them individually before we meet the actual community head. So we have their contributions that we can put to that person, and we're able to get answers on how to deal with it. So our community engagement plan, we have people who speak different local languages who are able to speak to the local population who don't speak English. That's one of our requirements for joining our program is obviously the ability to speak these local languages to be able to communicate effectively. We have people who will work with differently abled people. Something as simple as having a ramp in a building is something that doesn't occur to people who are abled, obviously, who don't use wheelchairs. Or we make sure we engage people who speak sign language, that sort of thing. So I know obviously women are just as a huge, oppressed demographic, but people tend to forget that not just women, but there's other intersections of, there's people who are excluded by the fact of their gender identity, their sexual orientation, like I said, their ability. So we've considered all these different groups and made provisions for how we'll deal with them. We ensure we bring them to the table so the male community organizers are aware that we do know this is happening in community. We do know these people have special needs, and we are insisting that for us to come in here and invest in this community, all these people's different issues are heard and tabled and solved before we actually start our work.
Excellent, thank you. Maria, would you like to comment?
I think Adako's response was right on. I would say here in the US, we have the very similar trends. It's obviously not just about women, but it's about any other underrepresented community. So be it Black and Latinx, being LGBTQ, being differently enabled. And what I've seen an interesting trend lately is that companies used to have different affinity networks, and now they're kind of putting all of them together in one group, and having the cross-pollination of ideas between initiatives that were different before, and then the other powerful trend that I've seen is kind of having a proactive approach towards getting the majority, in this case, white males, buy into these programs. So, as far as women, there's all these him for her programs that advocate and you know, these forums are great, you know, women getting together, this panel, this level of discussion that helps you build the support system, but bringing the male, bringing the men into the discussion is critical. So not just bringing them into the discussion, but making them become advocates and champions.
Absolutely. Vaishali, yes.
Yeah, very quickly, if I were to look at some of the other elimination mechanisms, I would say the legal framework is also an area which requires attention, I think, because, if we were to tweak it as we go along, we should make it more inclusive, more equitable, etc. So I think that's one area. I think the other is the access of information, and otherwise ignorance is a major cause of complacency in the ecosystem. So and not only women, but even children, for example, when we look at our youth, they are the ones who are going to be most impacted by the kind of negative impact of climate. So how much do they know? Are they aware? Are they getting interested to solve the problems which are going to impact them the most? I think these are some of the other tools through which we can ensure that there is a more kind of balanced transition which is happening.
Mm-hmm. We have a question from Diana Alvarez. How could you improve women's participation in the energy transition in regions where women have low levels of representation in government and in the private sector and are mostly working in the informal economy?
Yeah,
Adaki, would you like to respond?
Yeah, sure. So my recommendations, and obviously these things that I have been working on. My first thing, like I said, it's very personal to me, is the visibility of women in STEM. So I do understand sometimes in those kinds of communities, these girls who don't have access to education, access to information, they don't know what's out there. And if you don't know what's out there, you don't know what to aspire to. So we do have community outreaches where we go into this disadvantaged communities and let them know what STEM education is about. So the key is to motivate girls to choose STEM educations, first of all, because it's not just women who already work in energy companies. It's kind of like there's a whole spectrum. So it starts from something as simple as, because growing up in Nigeria, when you were in secondary school, which is high school in the US, in the first 3 years of secondary school, everyone kind of does the same subjects. And then we get to senior secondary school, and you have to pick between like arts and science subjects. Now, I went to a girls' boarding school, and I know a vast majority of people chose art subjects. And that's kind of where it starts from, because girls don't even realize. I mean, you go to classes like the further maths class or technical drawing or chemistry or physics, and it's literally 2 or 3 people. And you go into government and economics, and it's like the whole class is for or art. So starting from there is motivating those girls to choose a STEM education. And then when they actually get into the workforce, recruiting those women and then retaining those women. So like I said before, that my decision to work in any sector was inspired by someone. So seeing women in these kinds of positions, making sure they're visible, will propel or encourage that move that we're looking for. We need more women to become engineers and technicians, and because even if you have in an energy company, there was an energy company in Ghana I worked with when I was consulting. They had 180 staff, and out of that 180, only 7 were women, and those were all administrative positions, secretaries, typists. There was no engineer, and their reason for not being able to hire engineers was because when they go on site, there's only one dormitory for housing engineers, and they can't put men and women in the same space. Okay, build another dormitory. Like, I thought that was an obvious, solution, but it didn't occur to them. So coming in and being able to identify those little things that you can kind of change, and then they built a second dormitory and changed their hiring policies, and suddenly magically found female engineers that they claimed they could never find before. Then, so things like that, then companies in the energy sector must work proactively to create an inclusive work culture. We've spoken about, making sure there's overcoming counterproductive bias, giving room to diversity. They need to, changing parental leave policies, enabling women to shine instead of forcing them to choose between parenthood and career advancement. We also need to create an inviting, open workforce. So you say you have a lone woman in the Department of Men. She already feels that she stands out. She's probably going to take measures to kind of keep her head low. She's going to deal with harassment. She's going to deal with jokes that she cannot respond to. So it breeds like extra pressure already in that one lone person. So women need senior sponsorship in these roles, so they are offered the same opportunities to advance. And getting this right could impede the number of women leaving the industry midway through their careers and build a pipeline of senior talent. So I've spoken about Power Africa and other companies supporting aspiring women through mentoring, career planning, training, and supportive networks. So those women who manage to get to the executive level can now be role models to younger women everywhere, showing them that it's possible to break this glass ceiling. And again, I know all these points I feel like we've talked them to death, and people still keep asking, what can we do? And it's like, aren't we doing this? Maybe it's not being done fast enough, maybe it's not being done well enough, but these are little things that could make a huge difference.
Excellent, thank you, Adaku. Maria, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I would say one thing, do not underestimate the amount of power that advocacy groups and nonprofit organizations have. And I think it's a very important question that was asked. But I would say that decision-making processes these days have become a much more multi-stakeholder approach, and community representatives, media, environmental groups, all sorts of different entities have now a stronger voice in decision making. And in a world in which the policymakers and corporations and are dominated by men, you could actually use some of these organizations to really accelerate or strengthen your voice in a way that you probably couldn't do in the past.
I think that's an absolutely excellent point. I do think that there are ways to motivate and to create conversations and to put issues on the table through those mechanisms that would not have occurred 10 years ago in the sector. Vaishali, would you like to comment on this?
Yes, absolutely. I just want to kind of bring to light some statistics in India. If you look at we're talking about the formal and informal sector and how women are employed here. Over 90% of the women in India work in the so-called disorganized and the informal sector. What does that mean? That means that they're not they work in jobs which are labor sort of kind of categorized as laborers. They work in areas where there is no social security, there is no timely dissemination of wages. And as a result of which, what really happens is that they're also often limited by the patriarchal and religious norms in their ecosystem, which binds them to do certain things. What is that? What do we need to do to change this? I think there is a change in the policy making which is required, which makes it more, the remuneration in the sector is more organized and more legally sort of, defined, so that women have respect when they go out to work. At this point in time, 90% of the women are engaged in the sector, and they don't earn respect because often they don't get money for it. And so therefore there is domestic violence, etc., etc. So it leads to a lot of social issues. and really impacts women very negatively. So I would say just leadership in policy making so that we can change this and we can convert the 90% into no percent, so that there are, everybody is working in a formal sector where there is a proper legal framework, where they get paid, there is social security, etc. And just there's more respect with respect to how they're spending their time and earning a livelihood.
Thank you, Vaishali. We have 10 other questions. This is getting very interesting, and a number of different issues are touched on here. I'm going to work my way through the list here. We have an interesting question from Nimal Valipuram. Would the distributed energy paradigm play an important role in offering opportunities for women when a large funding pool is not available, where the ultimate objective is to get, understanding that the ultimate objective is to get large funding available for female-led startups?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. There's absolutely no doubt that for anything you want to do, which is entrepreneurial, whether it is in rural India or rural part of any, country or in the urban area, you do need funding. So I think we need to draw attention towards making funding available, because, where there are problems, there are opportunities, and where there are opportunities, there are entrepreneurial opportunities. You can't be an entrepreneur without funds. So the more we do, the less it is. And so we have to take the discussion around being able to raise more funds so that more people get engaged. And I want to say, as women suffer a lot more, they understand the problems better. So we really need to engage women. We need to fund women to find solutions in the supply chain, and even in core businesses, etc., where they can play a role. So I don't know if I've answered the question, but I think, yes, we need to draw the attention towards funding projects for women entrepreneurs.
Maria, would you like to comment on access to funding?
I would like to make a quick comment. I've been really, really encouraged by some of the recent programs that target what's called here MWBEs, which are women and minority-owned businesses. And I'll give you an example right here in New York City. The city of New York has dedicated pools of capital available for minority and women-owned businesses to do business with the city. So if you are a construction company, they actually have a dedicated effort towards bringing into the fold women and minority-owned construction companies to do business with the city. And a lot of them are related to greenifying buildings. And what's interesting is that, distributed energy is one aspect of it, but you can start small, which is really important here, because if the only business you could do with, let's say, the city of New York or the state of New York was $100 million project, no small startup by a woman or a person of color would stand a chance. But you have the ability to start small, and there's programs that are specifically designed to accelerate the advancement of women and minority-owned businesses. So I've seen that as a great example of something that worked, and you have the ability to start small and work your way up.
Excellent, thank you, Maria. Adako, would you like to comment before I move on to the next question?
Yeah, could you repeat the question? Because my chat box kind of, yeah.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, the question is, would the distributed energy paradigm play a role in offering opportunities for women when a large funding pool is not available?
Oh yeah, I truly believe so. So we have regional power pools here in Africa. So the West African Power Pool, which is kind of an amalgamation of different utilities in West Africa. We have the Central African Power Pool, the Southern African Power Pool. And as these are large electric utilities, but they're also looking into smart grids, into distributed energy resources, and they're supporting people. And we found out like there's quite a huge number of them being women who are going into the small smart grid decentralized energy sources. So it's been done through, it's not obviously not quite easy because they all need funding. That's pretty much everybody's first need. We need the money. And so they do try to bridge, or we actually, Power Africa helps to try to bridge this financing gap. We try to de-risk investment so that public and private investors will fund the projects that drive systemic reform. So making sure there's always, there's a social impact side to it as well. So we help to kind of engender the policies that make these companies take on women investors or take on women-owned businesses, women vendors. We work with West African Power Pool to improve their ability to review proposals through a gender lens to make sure female-owned businesses are ranked quite high. So it's something that is very important and has been basically, we're all very aware of it, and we're all doing our best to make sure this is highest priority.
Sounds similar to the procurement programs that Maria just talked about in New York, and can be very important mechanisms to enable startups to get going. Thank you. Here's an interesting question. It's directed to you, Adaku, but I would ask others to comment as well. As African countries depend on a lot on fossil fuels and other resources when it comes to their national economies, extraction activities, in parentheses, how do you envision a just transition happening? Do you feel that African governments are conscious of the upcoming challenges and rise of investments into projects that are less harmful to the environment and communities?
Yeah, very, very aware. But what people need to understand is, expanding the use of renewables is always the obvious solution, but then there's a crucial element of the cost of these technologies. There's an article from 2012 by Paul Collier and Anthony Venables called Greening Africa, Technologies, Endowments, and the Late Comer Effect. And they have this quote that says, Africa cannot afford cost-increasing mitigation. So any measures that it takes to green its energy usage must also be cost-reducing. So I think I mentioned this before, that there's always this rush by the global north to recommend varying solutions to the global south. We have proposals, we have assessments, we have studies, but then they don't take into consideration that these governments, as well as the people, do not often have the means to make this total change. In many cases, fossil fuels are just cheaper. So to wean people completely off them, renewable energy must be affordable. So of course, governments are thinking about this. When we get this 1,000,001 proposals, main thing we ask is, how are we going to afford this? How are the people going to afford this? And not just how do we afford it, how do we sustain it? It's not just buying it one time. How do we sustain it? How do I go to a village and tell them, don't cut down trees for firewood? What is the alternative means that I'm going to provide for them? So yes, they do think about it. Yes, they do try and make sure that it's at the forefront of our policies, of our negotiations, anything we're doing, we're ensuring that cost, which is I think it's one of the biggest problems here for us, that cost is as low and as affordable as possible.
Maria, would you like to comment? Yeah, I would add a slightly different angle to the great answer that Adaku gave us, which is, you look at some of these companies, some of these countries, and a very large proportion of their budget comes from fossil fuel extraction. And this really should present a challenge over the next 20, 30 years as we go through the energy transition. But we've seen some countries obviously emphasize gas over oil in terms of incremental projects as a transition fuel, if you will. And also we've seen an increase towards a focus towards extractive activities and mining of the minerals that we need, for example, for the build out of the electric vehicle infrastructure.
I would add as well, let's focus on the word transition. We are talking about a transition, and it needs to take into consideration the realities of each environment, each country context we're talking about. And as Adaku said, this dynamic of the global north and the global south, I think, is a very real one that needs to be contemplated and taken into consideration. And I think that, Maria, you talked a little bit about earlier how in order to achieve our goals to address climate change, we need to find technologies that don't exist today in doing so, I believe we need to take into consideration each individual context and each country's reality. And I think that is where the private sector needs to come in as well, and where private sector, the largest, multinational companies in the world need to be engaged. And I believe many of them are, if not all of them, in finding those technologies that are going to address these issues. Because I don't believe you can go into a village and say, just stop cutting down trees. An alternative needs to be presented that respects the reality of the lives of the people living there. And it has to be palatable, it has to be simple, it has to work. And it has to, and I'm harkening back to one of the panels from 2 days ago that Jason Bordoff, our founding director, was moderating, and a comment was made about, there can't be a transition without economic prosperity. And we can't go to a local population and say, okay, in the name of addressing climate change, we're going to ask you to lower your quality of life. That just doesn't work. Vaishali, would you like to come?
Have a trade-off.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, absolutely. Go ahead. We're all getting pretty excited about this.
I know, it's really wonderful. But Maria, why don't you complete what you were saying?
You go ahead,
Please
Vaishali. You go ahead.
Okay, great. Okay, so no, I think some wonderful points which have been made, and the advantage of having a conversation of this sort where we can learn from each other's global experiences is really invaluable. And so that's why I keep saying that what the Center on Energy Policy is doing is fantastic. And I'd like to talk about an anecdote which we at Renew Power experienced when we were starting this business about 10 years ago. So the naysayers said that, what is this business model? I mean, who in India is going to buy a more expensive source of energy, of electricity, right? So people are used to free electricity in India, right? They say free food, free house, and free electricity. So who's going to kind of pay for something which was, I think 3 or 4 times the cost of conventional energy at that point? And so as we speak now, renewable energy is cheaper than conventional in India. And it's a 10-year journey I'm talking about. As we speak, renewable energy is only 10% of the entire pool of the energy which is being generated. It's going to grow threefold in the next decade. So that's the kind of pace we're talking about. And as the scale grows, the cost comes down. And as the cost comes down, I guess there is more usage. There is, as Jason said, economic prosperity is important. We were able to validate the business model by setting up a successful venture. After that, there were many others who came into the country and other businesses which grew to generate renewable energy. So the point is that this was all fueled by a good inviting policy environment as well. So when a good policy environment comes with a model, example, we can make change happen. And as I was trying to say, when costs come down, the use increases, and when the usage increases, it becomes a bit of a mass movement. And so it's possible, Adaku. I think it's an ecosystem, and I'd be happy to have a one-on-one conversation with you at some point and talk about how this journey has been, because we've been observing it very closely. Or we can have another session. I mean, I know we have a little time left, but absolutely. So this, you need these success stories at different levels, at the local, remote, rural level, at an entrepreneurship level, private sector, public sector, government examples, some of the Nordic examples. All of these are encouraging. They make case for a socio-economic case for, this energy transition we are talking about.
Thank you, Vaishali. We're not going to get to all of the questions because they keep being added, but I want to ask a few more if we can. We've got about 5 minutes. We have a question from Abedli from the Chinese University of Hong Kong. His question is for all, particularly Adaku. It's on energy justice as it relates to the energy transition. An energy transition global target means that there has been an exponential increase in mining and the supply chain of rare minerals like cobalt and graphite and exotic rare minerals, which power solar panel, photovoltaic cells, and rotors to rotate the blades for wind turbines. In mining or mineral exporting countries, In the Congo, the DRC, for example, women and children are heavily impacted by the ecological damage and pollution to air and aquifers caused by these mines, as well as child labor. With the global demand for these minerals growing at a rate of 25% per year, are your organizations involved in these issues? If so, in what respects? Adaku, would you like to start?
Right. So we're not, yeah, my organization
Adaku, we're
is
having a little bit of
not
trouble
directly involved
hearing
in
you.
mining. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, I'm sorry. I was saying my organization is not directly involved in mining, but I do know in the Democratic Republic of Congo, there is and not set up a sort of truth and reconciliation committee, but to sort of start to hold these mining companies responsible. So there's no single local mining company in the DRC. Every single one is owned by international mining companies, by foreign mining companies out of Belgium and the rest of Europe and the US. And I think a lot of them came in with the savior mindset to, okay, we're going to do this, maybe build a school here, and then we'll take all your resources here. And when you're dealing with a poor country, they would usually just take that because they see the immediate advantage, not thinking of the long-term disadvantage. But obviously now that we've seen the mining has fueled civil wars in the Congo, the capital Kinshasa, the outskirts of Congo, a lot of them are extremely dangerous because these mining companies have formed little cabals of their own to protect their companies at a risk to the actual villagers that live in those areas. So it has become something of not just national or continental, but global concern. So I know I have heard that there's been kind of inroads being made into holding these companies responsible. So not allowing them to kind of mine in a certain area, or if they do, it's only to a certain extent. And then this is not the typical build a school, but introducing more local content regulations that can kind of regulate what's happening. But then personally, I believe this is kind of like just taping over like a broken rib, because I mean, if you decide you're going to train like 100, Congolese technicians, but you've destroyed an entire ecosystem, what really was the trade-off? What is the balance there? I personally don't see that, but since that's not my sector, it's not something I tend to weigh in on. But like I said, it's my continent, this is my region, so it's something I'm very interested in, and I'm watching very closely to see how that ends up.
Yeah, Maria, would you?
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a very critical issue. What I would say is that from an innovation standpoint, every single electric vehicle company and battery manufacturer is working on technologies that would optimize the use of these minerals and rare earths. As far as cobalt, for example, I know a variety of companies, Tesla included, are working on a solution that does not include any cobalt. So I think that I think it's called LFP, and it's a technology it's a battery that's basically cobalt free. And I think that they also had an investor day yesterday, and they announced a much cheaper way of mining lithium, which obviously is very important and is a major component of all of these batteries. So I would say, over the long run, bet on human innovation and on our ability to find more balanced and more cost competitive ways of developing these alternative powertrain technologies.
Yeah, and I would go back to your earlier comment, Maria, about how decision-making processes in these companies and these multinational companies is now much more permeable to the outside forces such as NGOs and other community groups. And I think that is a positive thing.
One acronym we haven't used in this panel today is ESG. Every company is being rated on ESG metrics, and obviously S plays a critical role in the equation.
Absolutely. There's not enough time to go through the other questions. They're all really interesting. I'd like to thank the audience, and I'm sorry we won't be able to get to those questions. Please feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to respond privately. I'd like to thank our speakers for joining us today, and thank the audience as well for tuning in. As we mentioned, the full video recording will be available on our website in a few days. Today's webinar is one of a series of virtual events the Center on Global Energy Policy is hosting as part of Climate Week NYC. The series continues at noon Eastern with the global launch event for the new publication, Energizing America. For a full schedule of our Climate Week events, please visit us online. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.